Start recording. Hello, everyone. Good evening. I am Jorge Duarte from Hortital Consulting from Portugal. I am here for the fourth Berry Talk this month in July. This is the conversation with leading global players, a meeting place to know personalities, companies, and technologies from the berry industry all over the world. Good evening, Thomas. How are you?
I'm fine, thanks, George. I'm doing very well. We are in the full swing with the European summer. It's very hot everywhere. We are just sitting inside with air conditioning, enjoying 1 hour of a fresh breeze. And I hope everybody will enjoy today's talk, which is very exciting.
Okay, today we don't have our colleague from Green Smile, Siham, but we are here, both me and Thomas, to present you a new episode and also a new face that we invite to join our conversations. Thomas, can you talk and introduce our guest, please?
Yes, today we have a new guest, Hannelie Human, a dedicated researcher from Social Insect Research Group in the Department of Zoology and Entomology from the Faculty of Natural and Agricultural Sciences of Pretoria in South Africa. Besides the academic record, she is a passionate beekeeper already for 17 years and much more. Welcome, Hannelie.
Guys, and yes, I can't complain about heat, but it's winter here with us.
Yes, thanks for joining us and accepting our invitation to be here at our Berry Talks. Just to get started, can you introduce yourself to our audience and say some words about you, who you are, and the role you have at your research group at the Pretoria University, and also as a consultant of different projects around the world?
Okay. So first of all, I think to introduce myself, I need to tell you that I absolutely love flowers and insects, and more particular bees, of course. I think I have the most bees in my house that are dead than anybody else because I tend to collect anything bee related. So I was fortunate to go back to university when my kids went to primary school and they were sort of off my hands. But the poor kids had to join me on numerous field trips and learn about nature and learn about flowers. So I started a PhD on a very well-known aloe in South Africa that the beekeepers use for a food source during wintertime. And I started to look into the qualities of pollen and nectar. And there was a whole new world that opened to me as far as floral rewards are concerned. Also about bees. And I just fell in love with this interaction between bees and flowers. And I started working with a lot of very well-known scientists at the University of Pretoria, amongst which I can say Professor Robin Crew and Sue Nicholson played a huge part in my life and my enthusiasm about this subject. So South Africa is home to two very well-known bee species. Yes, the one is the Cape honeybee, Capensis, and then we have the killer bees up in the northern parts of the country. Both these bees are quite unique, and the Capensis bees become a social parasite of host colonies when it enters the vicinity of other bee species outside of its native range. So that led to a lot of research and interest, and a lot of European scientists came to visit us and work with us. So, yeah, that's basically about the bees. We do have a few bee diseases. amongst which American foulbrood has entered the country for the first time in 2009. And that sparked an interest at the university and in our research group about bee diseases. So during my time at the university, I've also guided a lot of students, hopefully helped them to become very well-rounded persons, not only interested in science, but also as human beings, and to have a passion for what they have learned and the species with which they are working. I'm fortunate to be part of this university still after all these years. I think I'm more of a piece of furniture almost in this department, but the collaboration is ongoing and I love to be here. So all of this research also led me to actually meet with Nick Walton from United Exports. And I did some consultation work for them on blueberries and the genetics they are using. And it also led into me finding my place in science. I fell in love with blueberries, the flowers, the bee interactions, the challenges. And yeah, I've been working, excuse me, with them ever since. And now our aim at United is to actually understand our genetics better in terms of the floral rewards, the nectar that's being produced, the accessibility of pollen to the bees, how to make best use of our bees, and to establish a standard, pollination standard for United Export pollination, and that is where we are now. Another part of me is also looking at the macadamia industry, helping them to establish also standards for their industry. We are South Africa, that is the world largest corporation as far as macadamias are concerned. So there's also a lot to be learned and to be done there. And I think that's basically an introduction about myself.
May I ask a question? You were talking about pollination standards. What do you mean exactly for people who don't know anything or too much about pollination?
Okay, so for pollination, we know that all flowers or all flowering crops have a certain way to develop. We start off a season with a little bit of flowers and then we build up to a peak flowering season. And then, of course, there's the dwindling down after the season or towards the end of the season. But for these various times in the pollination season, we need different amounts of honeybees to achieve optimal pollination results. And when I say we have pollination standards, we need to know when to bring in how many bees, and that is basically the standards that I'm referring to. Also, we need to know what do we need in a hive. Is it a poor quality hive? How much brood do we need? How many frames do we need in a hive? In South Africa, we use the Langstroth hive that normally has 10 frames of bees or 10 frames in the box. So how much do we need in South Africa for our situation? So basically, short and sweet, that is what I mean by standards.
Okay, thank you very much for the explanation. I have also here a question for you. As both a researcher of bees and pollination expert, as also a passionate beekeeper, you do have an independent objective in each case, right? When you feel that these objectives start to mingle together and helping each other, did you have a moment while you were researching and also practicing your beekeeping, where you can fit both sides? Because there's a lot of the questions when you transit from research to practice. Can you explain us? Thank you.
Yeah, I think actually that eureka moment that you referred to was when I started doing this blueberry research the first time around, the first project that I did with United Exports, and I just realized, it's very nice to have scientific knowledge about your field, but to put it into practice, and at the same time be able to promote something that will benefit the bees, that will protect the bees. That's when it all came together, and the whole dynamic of having to actually do something at a quick pace and not an academic pace, that you can plan a project and you can continue researching it over a period of time. That's not the way it works in industry. And to actually find results at a quicker pace, it was just a whole two worlds coming together for the benefit of bees, I think. And this company that I'm working with is actually willing to listen to some of these ideas and to work together to create something, a better environment for our bees, to adapt certain practices in the industry to make sure that we protect our bees, that we do not kill them unnecessarily with accidental sprayings, that we just adopted a lot of practices that are really very nice to be living in that whole environment and to be a part of that. I think, it's just science and industry came together, and it's benefiting a little creature that can't say anything for itself.
Okay. Thank you. Do you have any other question, Thomas, before we go for the market update?
Yes,
Anything
I was particularly
Yeah,
interested in your approach when you say that you are acting also for the benefit of bees. And which are the main challenges which bees are facing in our environment and in our agriculture nowadays?
I think, beekeeping or bee losses, managed honeybee colony losses, has been in the news for a number of years now. And when we started out looking or investigating these losses, we didn't really understand the whole impact that the community, that agriculture, that human lifestyle had on this. But with progress in time, we came to realize that, everything we are doing is actually contributing to these losses, whether it is land changes, intensifying agriculture, spraying more and more dangerous pesticides to control certain things. All of these things contributed to more stress and are interacting stresses for honeybees that resulted in losses of these creatures, which are actually a keystone species for us. We are so dependent on these services to ensure food security that we need to create always. That's a task that I've set myself to do, is to always create more awareness of the plight of the bee. And if we can reach a mutually beneficial agreement between a growing or a grower in agriculture, whether it is blueberries, whether it's macadamias, whether it's raspberries, strawberries, and the beekeeper providing that service, we need to make sure that both parties benefit and ultimately ensure a sustainable beekeeping practice for beekeepers. And I hope I answered your question with that.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Thank you. We're going to continue. We have an interlude introduction here for the market trends and update in Europe. Something interesting that we will like to hear from Thomas, that is involved in a trading business, and it's also the intel information from the berry industry. Let's go and let's start.
the time of recording this report, the European market is quite depressed in terms of sales at retail level for the berries. In particular, we are coming through a very slow period in terms of the blueberry sales, which after the end of the Spanish season have faced a tough period with low sales and low prices. This has impacted mostly on the prices of Italian produce, which has covered the period between the mid end of June till now, and is now keeping impacting also on the start of the crops from Northern Europe and Central Europe. Romania, Poland, Serbia are starting now, and they are facing a market they are not really trying to go against. They have started at low prices. We have news of crops which will be short in those areas, and therefore it might well be that there is a peak of availability during the month of July till the beginning of August. And the quality of the fruit seems normal. We do not expect particularly big sizes due to the dry weather we have seen in this period just before harvesting. There is also another question mark, which will be the presence of the Peruvian fruit, which is expected to start around the mid of August in Europe. The very high costs for bringing the fruit from Peru to Europe will surely have an impact on the market, on the prices. We're talking about costs in excess of 10 up to 12,000 euros, which is much more than last year to bring one container from Peru to Europe. Nevertheless, we will see that most probably the crops of blueberries from Central and Northern Europe will drag on, and it will be difficult for everybody to find the right place at the right price on the markets for all the product which is foreseen. The quantity will be big also because at the moment the weather is good, there is no rain, and this will increase the availability. That's all for the market. We can't hear you, George. We cannot hear you. Switch on your mic.
Sorry. Okay. I was saying that it's always good to have the latest information because it's an industry that always have a great dynamic, and especially this year is a difficult season for everybody with all this pressure on the market, all the inflation, fuel, gas costs, everything is high. But let's go back again to our guest. We have here a few other questions. Hannelie, you are also, as you explained, you are involved in different projects of research until now. Could you highlight them, especially in the work that you are developing in the bees, and how you can also combine this research to bring to your consulting job, because you also have this both sides of you. Can you highlight the projects and also the work of consultancy that you're doing on pollination and bee study on farms and companies?
Yeah. So basically, for me, the ongoing work that I am doing and continues to do is basically looking at floral rewards. And that means the quality and quantity of nectar. Because indications from nectar will tell you, if you know how sweet it is, you will know how acceptable it will be to a honeybee. So that is very critical to understand in any crop, especially even in blueberries, the different varieties, the different cultivars, they all offer different things to the pollinators, in this case bees, in return for the pollination that they will get. Any problems with fruit set, the number of seeds, in other words, the taste of the berry, everything will be influenced by the successful visit of honeybees. So that is totally ongoing. It changes within season, between seasons, over years, and it is a fascinating field to continue to be in. Another thing is also the availability of pollen. That is becoming more and more of a question. How easily is this pollen available to honeybees? We all know that blueberries are a buzz pollinated plant and that there are insects that are better adapted to do this pollination. But honeybees, due to the sheer force and the numbers of bees, individual honeybees that are available in colonies, are by far the most economically important pollinator that we can have or bring into orchards. We need to know about navigation. How do bees navigate in these complex situations under nets? Are there ways that we can actually improve that? Are there ways that we can decrease a certain level of stress that the bees experience while they are under netted environments? So that's everything that's ongoing, basically always ongoing. And we never will probably have a clear answer to everything, because just when you know something, you realize how little you know and the more you need to know. Another thing that is actually also very important and close to my heart is pesticides, the effect of different pesticides. We need to know so much more about that. So that is ongoing. Nutrition of bees. Should we actually do supplemental feeding during pollination, or should we just leave the bees? And that feeds back into the pollination standards that we have. So that's also ongoing. And then a new project is actually, we are always talking about declines of honeybee colonies, but it's not only honeybees that are declining. Various other insects that are also doing a pollination or contributing to pollination. There's also a decline, and more of these declines are getting numbers. We know that syrphid flies are decreasing. We know that butterflies are decreasing. Flies. What do we actually know? Do we know what is even available on the farms? Well, I say available. What insects are present on farms? So we are busy with pollinator surveys to find out what is on the farms, how we can enhance that. We are establishing mega bee hotels. We call it bee hotels. It's more of a home for anything that wants to come and live in this protected environment. We are looking at different floral resources, which flowers can we plant. And something that is actually very interesting and fascinating is that we are all talking about IPM, integrated pest management, and we are spending a lot of money to release natural predators. But these predators are actually available for their service for a short period of time. And when they enter a new phase of their life cycle, where do they go to? So we are also trying to establish habitats where these natural predators will hopefully come and establish themselves for a period when they cannot be used as predators, and establishing new populations. Well, that's the aim of these projects, but that's the most interesting one that we are currently looking at.
Thank you very much. You mentioned the challenges of the netted environments. Growers worldwide are increasingly using covers to protect themselves either from rain, from hail, but also on the other side from the high temperatures. But this can have a huge impact on the behavior and of bees and also on their effectiveness actually on the crops. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, that is actually very true. If you think about the interesting part is when you go into these netted orchards at night, then you realize what any bee must face. It's this, everything looks the same. It's thousands and thousands and thousands of plants all looking the same. How can you actually make sure that the bee foragers return to the right colony? We've been testing colors using a coloring system where you can make hives more visible or at least add certain cues to the bees to use as landmarks. And therefore, you also need to understand how bees use vision. What do they see? Because they don't see the earth or flowers the way we do, they see different colors. So, in trying to know how bees use eyesight and what landmarks they are using, we can only try to help them to understand their world because you've taken them out of an area where there were, for example, aloes flowering at that moment. The next morning they wake up to an orchard full of white little flowers on blueberry bushes, all looking the same. So yes, trying to do a few little things, practical things, is the only way that we can try to help the bees. So adding more landmarks in the form of color.
Thank you. You traveled all over the world to visit the bee research. And what is the relationship you see or the difference between your experience in South Africa and what companies in agriculture are doing all over the world in terms of the growers and the beekeepers in general? Are the strategies for bee conservation different from what they usually do in South Africa?
Oh yes, I think there's the world is so wide and there are so many things happening, and we are at the bottom point of Africa, which is a very large continent. We have a unique situation, and yes, we are not always at the same level than the rest of the world is. But if you think about the fact that we have Africa and South Africa as well, then as the largest wild population of honeybees left in the world, that is already different. It means that our beekeepers in South Africa are using a system where they place out boxes to trap bees and to catch wild swarms. And that's a luxury that Europe or elsewhere doesn't have. But the negative point of that is that our beekeepers are spoiled to the extent that they think this is a resource that will be there forever. And they need to start to learn how to use this resource that they are so privileged to have in a more sensible way. We So that is one of the things that we are trying to come back with and say, listen, this is what we see is happening outside of South Africa. Why don't we try to be more preventative in our actions so that we are not ending up in a situation where we have to deal with the fact that we can't catch honeybees anymore from the wild. So that's the one thing. And then in our country, our beekeepers are also facing other threats that maybe is not so common in Europe. That is things like vandalism, stealing of hives, because some people unfortunately are lazy, so it's easy to go to a place and help yourself to other people's hard work and steal hives and use it for pollination. Um, and then something that they also don't do is that they have not learned yet, with the exception of a few beekeepers, to provide a professional service, a beekeeping service on the scale that is needed for pollination. If we are sitting with 500 hectares of whether it's macadamias, blueberries, avos, we need a lot of hives to actually deliver that service. How do you do that in a professional way? So I think on that level, our beekeepers can still learn a lot. The thing that I've noticed in our country is that our growers, they do not realize that they are actually paying for a service that they have the right to question. They can question people on the quality of the hives that are bringing in for so-called pollination. Are these hives really up to the standard that is needed or that is being paid for? So I think that is something that is changing amongst growers now. More awareness of the questions that they can ask, things that can be done. Uh, and I think, yeah, that is basically the two major differences that I would say uh, that we have compared to the rest of the world.
Okay, great. So in terms of conservation, you see also differences from what you see in South Africa. You call them spoiled, the beekeepers. So the conservation is still not a concern because there's different levels of professionalism in South Africa compared with Europe or United States or even other places that beekeeping is a very important part of the industry.
Yes,
You also mentioned the conversation we had before that you are involved in something really interesting, a new technology, right? That
that's
can you explain what it is? It's a project really interesting that you introduced to us last conversation, and I would like to ask you to explore that topic because I think it's a brand new thing, and for beekeepers on a professional level or even on a research level, it would be very interesting to uh, to the to introduce this new technology. Can I explain this?
okay. So first of all, when we started talking about quality control for our hives, the only way to really look at or determine quality was to physically inspect the hives. To open up the hives, to look at certain values, certain observations, to look at presence or absence of diseases, and so on. But that's a very challenging task to do, and not all people like beekeeping or doing it. And after opening 20 or 30 hives, you do become tired, and it's not so much fun. And if the bees become really grumpy, it's becoming a grueling task to do. So we started investigating tools that may be available to ease this task. And I came across a Swiss company that actually developed a monitoring device, acoustic monitoring device, that you can just slide into a hive, listen to hive noise, and actually be able to sit behind your computer and look at the data coming through. I'm working closely together with APEX, and we are very excited. The hives are in. We can determine when there's a lot of activity. We can look at the daily patterns of the hive. When are the bees foraging? Are they bringing back nectar? Are they offloading? Is there a higher activity that you can see? You can also predict swarming events, which will fortunately not happen in this time at this time of the year in South Africa. But we can actually predict when a hive became very angry, when it and decided to leave. So there are no more bees to do the job. So we can tell the beekeeper, listen, please go to this stand, go and collect the hive or replace the hive. There are no more bees. Or we can even be able potentially to tell when there was a spraying incident. Say something went awfully wrong and the bees start to die. We will be able to tell according to the amount of activity in the hive whether or not there's something wrong. And the last thing is we can actually also, well, it's so easy. I just get the adapted noise graph they are dealing with the noise and they are feeding me the data that I need to see what's going on in that hive. And I think we are looking at a potential quality tool, control tool that will be used together with this company. So watch this space.
Thank you very much, Hannelie. We are coming towards the end of our conversation. It's been a very interesting conversation. It opened up a whole new world, at least for me. It's been very interesting to learn about the interactions between humans and bees, which are not only the beekeepers. It's what we all do. We as humans, as growers, as marketers, as variety breeders, because you are telling us that every different variety of blueberries has a different reaction in terms of the pollination process. We have learned that there are pollination standards which help you to keep the whole process under control. We have learned about these new developments in these high-tech startups which are helping us to keep the whole procedure and system under control. And I think that the interesting message is that if we work towards protecting, preserving our bees, this will be in our favor, because this is what we need in the long term. And taking control of all these interactions is so important for our agriculture. And I think it's also a very modern way of looking at agriculture, rather than looking mostly at chemicals, looking at the bees, which are part of nature and are so such a loved insect by everyone in the world. So thanks again for joining us, and we hope that we will have a big audience all over the world to spread the word about protecting and preserving bees.
Yeah. Thank you very much for this opportunity to talk to you and to be able to share some of my enthusiasm and passion for honeybees. And yes, let's continue to save the bees on this planet.
Hannelie, it's a pleasure always when you have a conversation. I want to also inform our audience that Hannelie will be one of our speakers in the Morocco Berry Conference next fall. So everybody that's interested in the pollination and be in contact and learn more, because this is all continuous learning process. Every country is different, every beekeeper is different. I always say that beekeepers are special people, so we have to keep them alive and pushing the industry of the pollination, because that's where we live from, especially the growers and the food that we bring to our table. I want to finalize the conversation, inviting everybody to watch our next episodes. This is an update from the berry industry. We had a gap for a month. We want to restore and regain time. This month it's with our friend Hannelie Human, and keep updated. We're going to keep you updated with next episodes. Thank you again, Thomas and Hannelie, for this very nice conversation. Have a good evening.
Thank you. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.